Number 1, recognizing where the whitetail deer are when I'm entering or exiting a tree stand or blind. Now, I know entrance and exit routes have always been super important to killing big mature deer, but it wasn't until 5 or 6 years ago where I really started to recognize how that was impacting my hunt negatively or positively. Here's one example that when I first started hunting, I just didn't really even think of. Here in the Midwest, we've got a lot of ag fields, and what happens is the deer will bed down in the timber and then go to the ag at night to feed. I would be walking into my tree stand through the ag field in the morning, and I didn't really think anything of it until I started to have less and less success and see fewer and fewer deer in the timber closer to the bedding area, and I really didn't know why until I thought about it for a second. I'm walking through where the deer are feeding in the dark, and even though I can't see them, they can see and hear and smell me walking through their food source while they're out there feeding, and they spook and go somewhere else and don't take their normal route back to their bedding area. So that's one good example, is recognizing where the deer are when I'm walking in the morning, whether that be a food plot or some destination big ag field or something like that. Just recognizing, okay, it's 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, where the deer are going to be at and where do I need to avoid, and even more important, where is my wind blowing when I'm walking in. So not only do I need to make sure I don't walk through the area that the deer are at that time of day, but I need to be cognizant of where my wind is blowing and make sure the wind isn't blowing from me to the deer while I'm walking to my tree stand, because that can completely derail an entire hunt and make it so no deer come past the stand because they simply got blown out before daylight even hit. Now, another section of this goes to evening hunts as well. The same is true. Deer are going to be bedding in the cover, going out to feed in the fields in the evening. So after it gets dark, after an evening hunt, oftentimes when I was younger, I would just walk right through the ag field back to the truck and spook all the deer. And I was like, oh, it's dark out. It probably doesn't matter that much, but I was realizing the deer were just getting more and more and more educated, and they would see me probably get down out of the tree stand and literally just walk right through where they're feeding, bumping them out and blowing it up for that night and the next morning usually, and sometimes the following nights after that, because they would start to know that they're being hunted and where my tree stand actually is. A lot of times it can be necessary to even use different entrance routes to exit routes going in and out of a stand for one hunt. Say you're walking in through the ag field for an evening hunt. That's okay for the most part. I mean, you're spreading a little bit of scent, but not too bad. And the deer aren't going to be out in the ag field in the middle of the afternoon for the most part. So that's usually acceptable. Walk through the ag field to get to a stand for an evening hunt. But once night falls and all the deer are out in the field, you might need to be able to get out through the timber, not directly through like a sanctuary, but through more of a thicket or a timber area to get out of there instead of going through the ag field to blow all those deer out of there. And the same is true for a morning hunt. You might have to sneak in through some cover to pop into the stand as the deer are coming from the ag fields or the big food plots or wherever they're feeding for the night back into the cover. And then in the middle of the morning or late morning when you're getting out of the stand, you can slip on out through that ag field where the deer aren't going to be during that time of the day. So it kind of goes both ways in the morning and evening. Even when it's dark out, you still need to be thinking about where the deer are going to be at. Are they going to be in my food plot, in an ag field, across the road? Are they going to be half a mile away, which is possible, and then you can just slip in and then they'll come back through possibly. It just depends on the tree stand, on the property, on the state, the time of year. There's a lot of different variables, and making sure that my wind isn't blowing into those areas while I'm accessing the stand. So it really narrows down a lot of the good, solid stand locations. Not only do you need great access as far as deer not being able to see you, or you're not walking through areas that deer are in during that part of the day, but also your wind not blowing through those areas and to the deer during that part of the day too. So number 2 is generally related to Western hunting. I learned this tip from antelope hunting, screwing up time after time after time again and realizing what really does not work well. And that's when I'm popping over a hill. I don't want to be silhouetted whatsoever. This can go for antelope, elk, mule deer, even whitetail deer, pretty much any species. You do not want to be silhouetted on the top of a hill. But like I said, I learned this from antelope hunting. I would pop up over a hill to see if there's an antelope, or maybe I knew there was one in the area. I would just pop right up over the top when I first started hunting them, and they would always see me and blow out of there and run like a mile away and just be gone. So what I learned to do was, if there's, you know, a slight rise in the hill, maybe even a little bit of a cut down in the wash down below, I would always go lower. I never want to go on the very top side of a hill when I'm peeking over. I want to go low and kind of creep around the edge of the hill, whether that be to the left or the right, whatever's best for the wind or that certain situation. Go around that side, and preferably, if there is another hill behind you, if you can get in between that hill and the animal, that way when you pop up over the hill, there's that backdrop and a back hill behind you, so you're not silhouetted at all. That's kind of a perfect scenario. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but just slowly slipping up on the side of the hill rather than over top can really help with concealment and really sneaking up on the game. And then along with this is really making sure you look really good once you pop over that hill. There were so many times where I knew an antelope was over this hill somewhere, and I would kind of pop over and look for quite a bit, and I just wasn't seeing him. So I'd be like, oh, he must be gone. And I would stand up and start walking, and then boom, there he is 30 yards away. And I probably could have got a shot at him, but I wasn't patient enough. So I call it clearing out. I like to clear out an area when I'm popping over the hill, whether it be a ravine or a ditch, maybe a mule deer hunting and there's a ravine and might be some deer bedded in there. I want to clear out the entire thing before I get lazy and stand up and start walking around, because you never know where an animal could be crouched down next to a bush or in a little bit of a cut or a draw. And that's a perfect stalking scenario. If they're in that location, you can really be able to get close, but you got to be able to know they're there and see them, otherwise you could spook them. So clearing an area out is super, super important. It takes time, it takes patience, and I still struggle with it today. But I know I need to just be diligent and use my binoculars and glass every single inch of that little valley or that little cut or that bull or whatever the scenario is, to make sure that that animal that I'm trying to get a stalk on is not in there for sure before I go over the next hill and move on to the next location. Because so many times in the past I thought the animal wasn't there, so just throw my hands up and be like, oh, he must be 100 yards over the next hill. And I'd stand up and look down here, and there he was right there, and spook and blow out of there. So that's been super crucial for me, is just slowing down, being a little bit more patient on Western game especially, and just making sure I look super, super diligently in every single area when I'm popping over a hill. Number 3 pertains to elk hunting, and it's about elk bugles and how far that sound carries. So, you know, an elk's a huge animal, and they just make a huge roaring bugle when they do it. And when I first started hunting them, I was thinking this bugle was just insanely loud, and if I ever heard it, that means, you know, the animal's probably a long ways away potentially, unless it was just really, really loud. And kind of what I've learned over the past couple seasons hunting in Colorado and Wyoming is, in these thicker timbered areas, that bugle does not carry near as far as I think. One instance last year in Wyoming, I was kind of on top of this little knob, and I let out a bugle late afternoon, and a bull responded to me, and I thought he was right across this valley, and I went on my map on my phone, and it was 1,200 yards exactly across the valley to where I thought, I mean, I could have swore this animal was bedded right on this knob. I saw it on my map. I'm like, oh, he's bedded right there, 1,200 yards away. It sounded like he was a long ways away. So I took off after him. I mean, tearing through the trees, because I didn't have a lot of time before it gets too late. So I took off after him, I mean, so fast. And you know, long story short, that video is here on the channel if you want to watch that full thing unfold. But the animal was a lot closer than I thought. That bull was about 400 yards away, not 1,200. So what actually happened was, thankfully, he bugled again as I was getting closer to him, and I heard him again, and I thought, you know, he's probably 200-300 yards away, I bet. So I was walking probably faster than I should have been, and then he bugled again. I'm like, oh, you know, maybe he's not. So I was still thinking he was about 100 to 150 yards away. Man, sure enough, he was like 50 yards away in the thick timber, and that bugle sounded like it was hundreds of yards away, and I couldn't believe how close he actually was. So I did not close the deal on that bull, but I did get a bull later on that week, which was pretty awesome. But just something I found multiple years in Colorado, and then again in Wyoming. It's, you know, in these thicker timber areas, that bugle just does not carry near as far as I originally thought. It'll carry a couple hundred yards or so, but it's usually not going to carry a mile or further in the thick timber. Now in the wide open, or if you're up on a high point, or if the bull's up on a high point, it definitely can carry pretty far. But for the most part, like if I'm in the timber from here on out and I hear a bull bugle, he's probably half the distance or less than what he actually sounds like. You know, he sounds 400, he's probably 200. He sounds 150, he might be 75. He might be right there almost in range. So just something I've had to learn, and I'm sure all across the West it's a little bit different, going down south or going down to, you know, North Idaho where it's super thick, and different places, Nevada, it's wide open. So different places, I'm sure the elk sound different, and then the bugle carries a little bit different based on the terrain. But like I said, Colorado and Wyoming, where I've personally elk hunted, I found that to be true multiple times. Hopefully that tip can help you out. Bugles don't carry as far as I personally thought, so you might want to get ready if you're in the woods and you hear one bugling in the timber. It might be a lot closer than you think. These have been some of the top 3 hunting lessons I've learned over the past few years, and some of the mistakes I've made and had to learn from the hard way. So hopefully teaching you about this will help you learn and be able to be more successful in the woods, whitetail, western game, and elk hunting. There's a little bit of everything there. So I hope that you find better success because of these tips and have a great time on your next hunting adventure. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful whatsoever, it would really mean a lot to me if you liked it and subscribed to the channel. And if you have any other lessons that you want me to talk about or you learned yourself, comment them down below. I'd really love to hear some of the lessons that you've learned out in the hunting woods.